Hello class, this video is going to be lesson 2 of your primer worksheet, and we are looking at the investigation of climate. And now the focus of this video is we're looking at variables that affect the climate on our planet. We're also going to focus on variables that have changed our climate. So this is definitely going to be an investigation of climate in the variables that affect it. Okay? So the first section is going to be what is climate? And you can find this in your book on chapter 3, section 1. All right? And the first definition we're going to look at is weather. Now, weather is the short-term state of the atmosphere. And the key phrase in this definition is short-term state of the atmosphere. And this includes temperature, humidity, precipitation, wind, and visibility. You've probably heard of the temperature, humidity, precipitation, wind, and visibility from the weather report given in the morning. All right. The second definition that we're going to look at is climate. And climate is the average weather conditions in an area over a long period of time. And again, the key phrase in this definition is long period of time. Whether it was short term. Okay? So climate is long term. And this would be an example of like the almanac that you hear of, the farmer's almanac, where they talk about average temperature and they can kind of predict what the weather is going to be like that day. Also, you could say the average 20-year snowfall. So knowing the average amount of snow you're going to get in 20 years. Okay? The next definition we're going to look at is latitude. Okay? And latitude is the distance north or south from the equator. North or south of the equator. All right? And this is expressed in degrees. Okay? And looked it up on Google Earth, and 44.5 degrees north is Stevens Point latitude. All right? Just a little tidbit of information. All right? And now, when looking at latitude, we have to look at solar energy. Okay? Solar energy is the energy our planet gets from the sun. The sun. Okay? And the amount of solar energy affects the temperature.
Laura Beckman, could
So depending on your latitude is going to depend on how much solar energy you get from the sun. Usually, the higher the latitude, the less amount of solar energy you're going to get. Okay. Now, seasons also are affected by latitude. All right. A season is a division of the year. Actually, latitude affects seasons, but a season is a division of the year. This is marked by changes in weather. Ecology. And hours of daylight. Okay, so there are many variables that affect seasons. Okay, and depending on where you are in the world, the latitude, it's going to affect how profound your seasons are. Okay, so the higher latitude or the way lower latitude, you're going to have 4 seasons, which are summer, winter, spring, and fall. Okay, and the cause of this is the axis tilt of the Earth and the latitude. And these affect the temperature. Okay, and remember, latitude is related to solar energy. Okay, and that affects the temperature. Another definition that we want to look at are prevailing wind. Okay, prevailing winds are winds that blow mainly from one direction during a given period. Okay, and this affects the amount of precipitation. Okay, if prevailing winds form over warm air, there's more moisture. Moisture is increased. Also, if prevailing winds form over water, again, there's more moisture. And when we talk about precipitation, precipitation is water that falls to Earth as rain, snow, or sleet. Right? So there's different forms of precipitation, but it's basically different types of water, different states of water. Okay? So moving on, now we want to look at the effect of land features on climate. And you wouldn't think land would have too much effect on climate, but it does. It does a lot. Okay? Now, mountains have a profound effect on climate. They affect the temperature and precipitation of the region by affecting the prevailing winds. The temperature and the precipitation of the region by affecting the prevailing winds. Okay? And the way it does this is through elevation. And elevation is the height of a landform above sea level. So if the mountain is a lot higher than the sea level, the higher its elevation going to be. They're a direct relation. Okay? And as elevation increases, the temperature decreases, goes down. Okay? And if you think of mountains, they kind of get in the way of the prevailing winds, which causes them, the winds to rise and then form precipitation on the other side of the mountains. Okay? Or on that side of the mountains. So large bodies of water. Okay. Now we're going to look at large bodies of water. And large bodies of water absorb and release heat more slowly than land. So water is the one that moderates the climate. It's the one that affects the climate. So large bodies of water, we're talking about oceans. That's going to have a greater effect on the climate than the land because it has, again, a greater specific heat. We talked about specific heat last unit, and the greater the specific heat, the more energy it can absorb or release. Okay. So another thing we're going to look at is lake effect precipitation. And this is another effect that has on climate. Lake effect precipitation holds more moisture than land, so increased precipitation is common. Okay? And we're talking about air here. Air holds more moisture than land. So increased precipitation. And that's what you're going to see a lot around the Great Lakes. There's going to be increased precipitation because the air is able to hold more moisture, and more moisture is going to go onto that land and create snow. And that's where you get that lake effect snow. And that's one reason why Green Bay gets a lot of snow, because of the lake effect. Okay? Ocean surface currents is another thing that we're going to look at. And those are steam-like movements of water that occur at or near the surface of the ocean and they move/carry warm or cold water that affect the temperature. And this affects temperature. Okay, so these are steam-like movements of water that occur at or near the surface of the ocean, and they move or carry warm or cold water, which affects the temperature. All right. Now we talked about now we're going to talk about climate zones. Okay, and Earth has 3 major climate zones. three major climate zones. Tropical, which is by the equator. Temperate, and Stevens Point is in the temperate region. And polar, which is by the poles, of course, okay, which is very cold. And these climate zones have different, have specific biomes in these major climates, okay. And we spent a lot of time on this for class. And a biome is a large region characterized by a specific type of climate. Remember, climate is long-term, and certain types of plant and animal communities. So there are specific plants and animals in these communities, in these biomes. And to direct you, there is a good picture on figure 10 in your textbook, which you can be found in chapter 3, section 1. Okay? So that's all we're going to cover for section 1. But now I want to move into section 2. And section 2 is the changes in climate. And the changes in climate is, again, chapter 3, but it's in section 4. Okay? And remember, the focus was looking at the variables that have changed our climate over the history of our planet. And these are things that have changed our climate over the history of planet. And one of the major things was the Ice Age. Okay? And we're going to put the Ice Age in blue, kind of representing cold. Okay? So Ice Age. It was a long period of climate cooling during which ice sheets cover large areas of Earth's surface. And this is also known as a glacial period. Okay, so this is when Earth's surface is covered in ice, hence glaciers. All right, and again, glacial period is during this period ice sheets advance and sea level drops. So ice sheets advance because the water is taking a solid form, which causes sea levels to drop. So there's more ice and ocean levels drop. Now, interglacial period, okay, and that's kind of what we're in right now, is when there's less ice and there's an increase in ocean levels. So the ocean water, there's more water in the ocean levels. And we're kind of in an interglacial period right now because the ice is receding, the ocean levels are increasing, okay? And now we're going to look at Milankovitch theory, okay? And this is a theory that the scientists came up with. And it explains why an ice age isn't just about one cold long spell. So an ice age isn't just about being cold for a really long time, right? And his theory included an orbit change, okay? And he said that during the last 1,000 years, 100,000 years, sorry, our orbit has changed from elliptical orbit, which is like this, okay? So it's flatter, to a circular orbit, which is like that. And he's saying that our orbit has changed from elliptical to more circular, right? And this affects the axis tilt, which is talking about the axis tilt change. And this is when the tilt of the Earth is greater, the poles receive more solar energy. So as the tilt increases, the poles get more energy. So tilt increases, the poles get more energy. Okay? And he's saying that our tilt of our Earth is increasing, and that's why the ice caps are melting and creating the ocean level, or causing the ocean levels to increase. All right? So another thing that we want to look at is plate tectonics in that theory. All right? And this theory is the movements of the tectonic plates of the outer crust of our planet can cause continents to move. And if the continents move closer to the poles, we will have another ice age. Okay? So the movement of plates, tectonic plates, can cause continents to move, and if the continents move closer to the poles, if they move closer to the poles, we'll have another ice age. Our tectonic plates are constantly moving, and if they move our continents too close to the poles, we'll have another ice age. And for your information, the continents, how they're located now, are not how they always have been. There was a thing called Pangea, and this was a giant landmass that was formed when all the continents were connected. So at one time, all of our continents were connected. You didn't have North America or Europe. You had Pangea, which was all of them connected together. Okay? And the last things I want to talk about, one of them is volcanic eruptions. All right? I'll put this in red because volcanoes, lava's hot. Volcanic eruptions send a large amount of dust, ash, and smoke into the atmosphere. So when a volcano erupts, it dumps a lot of that into our atmosphere, and it blocks the solar energy from the sun and cools the planet. Blocks energy from the sun and cools the planet. So we're not able to get that solar energy from the sun anymore, and our planet cools. And that'll significantly change the climates of our planet in the biomes. Another thing that can change our climate is an asteroid impact, okay? And it has in the past. This is when an object that orbits our sun, so an asteroid, strikes our planet's surface. Okay? So it strikes our planet's surface. And the reason why this is important is because of the debris. And debris is dust and smaller rocks that are released into the atmosphere during impact. Right? So again, it's like volcanic eruptions releasing that debris or dust or small rocks into the atmosphere. It blocks out the solar radiation or the solar energy, and it cools our planet because it's blocking the energy. All right? And the last thing that we're going to talk about that changes our climate is the sun's cycle. And this is basically an 11-year cycle from solar maximum, and that's increased energy and radiation, to solar minimum. Okay? So it's an 11-year cycle where you have solar maximum, where the energy is the highest, to solar minimum, where energy is very low. Okay? And another thing with the sun are sunspots. Okay? And sunspots affect our climate, and they're dark spots on the surface of the sun. And then more of these are present during the solar max. So more are present during the solar max portion of the sun cycle. So these have something to do with the increased amount of solar energy. All right? So sunspots do affect our climate of our Earth. All right? And that's going to conclude lesson 2 of the primer worksheet, which deals with the investigation of climate.